In this session, you will be learning about the teaching strategy Checks for Understanding, also known as CFU. In this session, our learning target will be, I can embed Checks for Understanding within my lesson to formatively assess my learning target. Checks for Understanding is directly tied to the Iowa Teaching Standard number 3. Teachers will demonstrate competency in planning and preparing for instruction. It is also tied to the College Community Strategic Plan Focus number 2. We believe all educators matter, and as a district, we are committed to professional learning communities where we focus on the 4 PLC questions. Checks for Understanding relate to the 2 PLC questions, what do I expect my students to know and do, and how will I know when they get there? The purpose for using Checks for Understanding in our daily instruction is so that we can check on our students' understanding of the content at least 3 times throughout a lesson in real time as we teach. Why use Checks for Understanding? We use Checks for Understanding to ensure the success of all our students. We also use them to drive instruction and make informed decisions during a lesson. If you use a Check for Understanding and realize that students are not understanding what they need to know, you might have to go back a step in your gradual release model. For example, you may need to continue longer in I do, or you might have to move from a we do back to an I do. Another reason is to find out who does and doesn't know the content you are teaching, and to correct misunderstandings immediately in real time. And lastly, to foster student engagement and ownership in learning. What are Checks for Understanding? Checks for Understanding is a way for you as a teacher to continually verify that students are learning what is being taught while it's being taught. So now that we know what a Check for Understanding is, what is the difference between Checks for Understanding and just giving students the opportunity to respond? Opportunities to respond are managerial movements. For example, thumbs up if your materials are ready, hands on your head if you can hear me, or point to the thesis statement in your essay. Checks for Understanding, in contrast, is very focused and purposeful. We are not just using them to increase engagement and/or for management. The purpose of Checks for Understanding is to inform instruction. They are tied to the content and standards. So both Checks for Understandings and opportunities to respond increase engagement and allow students to have voice in the classroom. Checks for Understanding are different because they serve a different purpose. Checks for Understanding are used as a form of assessment. They drive our instruction in the moment during the lesson and are directly tied to the learning target. Today we will cover the TAPL moves and varied response examples. You can find these resources in Google Classroom and may want to reference them throughout the screencast. A checking for understanding strategy that we will cover today is called the TAPL moves. TAPL stands for T, teach first, A, ask a specific question to the entire group that is tied to the content and learning target that will be covered. This is used to get students' attention. P, pause and pair share. This gives students time to pause, think about the question you just posed, and start to construct an explanation. P, pick 3 non-volunteers. This helps you to dipstick to get a sample of the class's understanding. L, listen to the answers. Do students understand? Are they almost there? Or are they lacking understanding? And lastly, E, effective feedback. We will echo if correct, elaborate if tentative, or explain if incorrect. These TAPL moves are used by the teacher as he or she checks for understanding throughout a lesson. In step 1 of TAPL, which is teach first, teaching first gives students equal opportunity to answer because they have all experienced the content. And then step 2, A, ask students specific questions around the content they have just learned. Here are some examples of what this might sound like. What is one difference between plant cells and animal cells? Or, in your own words, what is alliteration? During the asking question phase, avoid asking opinion questions such as, does everyone understand? Step 3, pause and pair share, also known to the students as think, pair, share. We will watch a short video around this strategy.
How to think, pair, share. Think, Pair, Share is a learning strategy that promotes classroom participation, can be used at any age, and can be planned or impromptu. Think, Pair, Share is a great way to encourage higher-level class discussions by allowing students time to think and reflect beforehand. In order to introduce Think, Pair, Share into your own classroom, be sure to model the technique first with a volunteer. Allow students to ask questions at this time to ensure that they fully understand how it works. The strategy itself involves 3 steps. Step 1, Think, begins with the teacher asking a higher order thinking question. Then, students are quiet for a minute or 2 so that each can think on their own about the question. The second step is Pair. You may assign specific pairs, use elbow partners, or students may choose their own partners. Students will then share their thinking with their partners, discuss ideas, and ask questions. This should take about 2 to 5 minutes. The third step is Share. Students now share their ideas with everyone in a class discussion. Allow students to choose who wants to share their thoughts, ideas, and questions with the whole class, in order to help all students feel comfortable and safe. There are many benefits to introducing Think, Pair, Share in your classroom. Silent think time improves the quality of student responses, while pairing and sharing build oral communication skills. In addition, many students feel safer and find it easier to share with one person rather than a whole group. Also, students can retain more information when they have the opportunity to reflect and discuss. In sharing their ideas, students take ownership of their learning and negotiate meaning rather than relying solely on the teacher's authority. To help introduce Think, Pair, Share in your classroom, remember that classroom posters are a great way to remind students how the strategy works. You can also use worksheets to help keep your students organized. Good luck using Think, Pair, Share in your own classroom.
As you saw from the video, we pause, pair, share. This is a strategy where time is built in for the teacher and students to pause so students can think. When pausing, wait what you think ample time would be for the concept being covered. Research says at least 3 to 5 seconds is the minimal time your brain needs to think and process a question, or up to 8 to 10 seconds. More time might be needed, like 1 to 2 minutes, when trying to understand a complex concept or when knowing the needs of the students in your classroom. The pausing time is given so students can think about the specific question that was posed by the teacher about the content. This gives students time to prepare their explanation. Pair. Students are then given time to share with another student and also listen. They are able to deepen the understanding and form more clarity. This also allows all students the opportunity to answer every question. Share. Students are able to share voluntarily, or teachers are able to choose non-volunteers. Students were able to construct an answer not only with their ideas, but also with others. The act of practicing by sharing and also discussing with their partner helps students feel comfortable when being chosen to share out. Picking non-volunteers will help you as the teacher know if everyone is learning. Next, we have the second P in TAPL, pick a non-volunteer. When picking a non-volunteer, you might want to reference the Checks for Understanding Strategies document that is linked in Google Classroom as we go through this section of TAPL. Again, the reason why we ask students to pause and pair share is to ensure they have enough wait time and the opportunity to process with a peer so everyone is prepared to give an answer. This is a strategy solidly grounded in research and has a variety of ways you can evoke a response from your students. Here are some examples. Number 1, sampling. Sampling is a true non-volunteer. We are randomly choosing volunteers so we can get the dipstick sample of what all students understand. Number 2, signaling is also a way of sampling if done privately, but it is the nonverbal version. Numbers 4 through 6 require closer observation to student discussion and the group, which are pair, share, group, and choral. Ways to pick a non-volunteer. We are now going to watch a short clip on ways to pick a non-volunteer. Remember, you also have the resource linked in Google Classroom.
Savvy teachers assess student knowledge every day, every few minutes, in every content area. Teachers call this checking for understanding.
Checking for understanding actually is something that goes on continuously in the class. It's not just tests or something that sums up at the end of an activity.
And it's not just the first day, the pre-assessment. We get an idea of where they are and how much work or how much focus we have to put on certain aspects.
Then I'll adjust how much I need to emphasize, or if there's a particular concept. I can't just push forward unless my students understand. I'll lose them.
Effective teachers use a variety of approaches to check for understanding. This information helps them identify gaps in student learning, as well as areas where students exceed expectations.
In Japanese, there's always so many things we do activity-wise that when you know it, you absolutely know that you know it because you're able to go through and understand what's happening. And when you don't know it, you also know because you feel pretty lost. And that this is a different language from most others and that you can't really fake it. Either you know it or you don't.
Usually when they're doing it correct, they see a smile, a light bulb goes off, and they're real excited about it. And that's how I know they're understanding.
When you're teaching a language, the first nonverbal cue is just silence. If the students say nothing, then usually it's because they're not sure what to say or they just don't know how to say it.
I was kind of doing two things at once. I was passing out papers, but I was also, okay, how far have we gotten? 5 minutes have passed. Who's almost done?
Informed teachers adjust their instruction based on student feedback, visual, verbal, and nonverbal cues.
Really checking out who's struggling and who's not.
Is the feedback that nobody is able to answer the question, or is the feedback that only half of the students are able to answer the question, or everybody is answering the question?
When they're not understanding or don't really get it, then they get this kind of puzzled look and it's like, I'm not sure. They'll get a frustration.
So instead of just plodding along in the same activity, we'll stop there, we'll do some more drills, maybe pull out the vocabulary that they need.
Una tarjeta azul.
Quality instruction and assessment involves student interaction, choice, and structure.
I think one that we used today that was real helpful was like the flip cards, because then, you got a chance to see if you got it right immediately, and if you got it wrong, you got an explanation as to why you got it wrong, so you wouldn't make that mistake again.
Like something's flowing, imperfect, you would think of water, so you use blue, and red is preterite, which means it only happened once, so it's you'll remember the colors by color.
Okay, listos.
The clickers help because it's a different way to learn the same thing. If you're into that kind of learning, it helps you a little bit differently.
So elbow is in front. And what's the last one?
Follow through. They ask us questions to make sure we understand it, and if they'll teach us more if we don't.
Peer-to-peer evaluation is another strategy to check for understanding.
Students are checking for understanding with each other as a peer evaluation, which is standard 2, benchmark 1, and then the indicator is 2, where they have to work with each other and say, okay, practice, how does good practice help them improve?
Good job.
The peer evaluation, I decided to do that because obviously we have to communicate with people every day, and you get constructive criticism when you get a job and you get older. And it's something that kids need to learn now so they can be accustomed to it, because otherwise, if they don't have that feedback or that dialogue back and forth with others, then they're going to take it personally.
For some teachers, the process of checking for understanding is natural. It's looking for cues, asking the right questions, listening attentively, and waiting patiently for students to respond. For other teachers, it's a learned craft.
Now that we have learned how to pick a non-volunteer, we need to L, listen to the response. Listen to your students. Every time a student answers, you need to make a decision. Are they with me? Do they need reteaching? What do I need to do? After listening, you as a teacher need to be ready to provide E, effective feedback. When giving students feedback, echo if they answer your question correctly. This affirms to the student and the class it is a correct answer and allows all students to hear it. Elaborate If the student's answer is a little tentative, you should elaborate it, rephrase it, and make it more clear. And lastly, explain. If multiple students answer your question incorrectly, you need to reteach. Where could you embed meaningful checks for understanding? Here are some suggestions. You could place a CFU after stating the learning target, after delivering new content, while students are in the midst of a guided task, before asking students to complete a task without support, or as an assessment at the end of a learning task and/or experience. Now, to apply your learning around checks for understanding, I will give you a rundown of the task, but a description will also be linked in Google Classroom. 1. Review one of your lessons. It can be an upcoming or recent lesson. 2. Determine where you can place one or more checks for understanding in your lesson. Best practice is to include at least 3 checks for understanding throughout your lesson. So after looking at your lesson, determine how many more you will need to incorporate to have at least 3, and determine where they should be placed. 3. Lastly, determine which varied response strategy you will incorporate in your lesson and why. Remember, we provided a resource that we linked in Google Classroom that lists 60 different ways you can vary your response. Again, remember to reference this assignment in Google Classroom.